Okay. So good afternoon. I am Anto Budiarjo. Welcome to Monday Live. This is something that we do every Monday afternoon at 3 p.m. Eastern to figure out what the future of smart buildings is all about. So glad that you can join us today, live or on YouTube. In case you're wondering who we are listed on mondaylive.org. So head over there. And just probably the most important point to make in the preamble here is that views expressed on this hour are personal, not of any company or organization. Just keep that in mind. Please do post questions, comments, and other stuff on the Zoom chat. We really appreciate it when it gets really sort of collaborative and engaging with you guys. So looking forward to that. And in case there's anything on this slide deck that you want to look at, it is also on the homepage of mondaylive.org. So head over there. So this being the first show in November, we have a new theme. And our theme for this month is System of Systems. We were talking about System of Systems last week, almost as sort of a setup for this month. That was by design. So hopefully we're going to be talking about System of Systems, maybe not all that's sort of the technology side of System of Systems, and more really on the implications of it from an industry and from business and other aspects of it. So it's not really just purely a technical term that we want to explore. So our agenda, we have our normal chit chat, and then we want to talk about System of Systems. And really today, we want to really be talking about the value of System of Systems to buildings, and again, buildings, people, buildings industry. So why are we bringing it up, and why is this important? So hopefully we can have an interesting discussion with that. But before we get into that, Ken, what's going on in the industry?
Lots. Everybody is going 90 miles an hour. And then faster. Yeah, so I think the big thing for us is it's just a little over a year ago that we did the reinvention of the site, and we had a dream, and we are actually achieving that dream. The dream was to get the industry more involved and make automated buildings an industry resource built and supported by the industry, and that's really starting to take legs, and we're really pleased with the results we're getting. This enables us to do things like AHR online free education sessions. We've got the agenda up there. We're hard at confirming the speakers, and what's happening there is we're giving more autonomy to both the speakers and the moderators, and the programs are exciting. They're going in a whole bunch of directions. Everybody's bringing a piece to the puzzle, and really looking forward to that. Some other things that are happening is our latest sponsors have obviously been looking and thinking in the ways of the IBB, and I just wanted to read some words from some of our newest sponsors. The latest one is: we are creating a world where IoT analytics and controls are open, portable, shareable, advanced native BACnet, open APIs, and first design rapidly discover and imported over 100,000 of points unlocking any object and service. So I kind of think that's the kind of some of the stuff we've been talking about. And the other one says delivering cost-saving business outcomes. I think that word would have been used by I believe Mark was using that word a lot, and I very much think it's a good word that we all should start focusing on. So we're starting to see people coming up and starting to share their wares and sell their wares. And this is sort of a whole side of automated buildings I hadn't quite seen. I was thinking we'd be supported by the traditional people we knew, but we're getting a lot of new players that want into our space, and they're telling us their stories. So I think that's a neat one. I took the time to watch the Passive Logic show last week. I felt very bad for them. They were doing a live stream, and they had technical difficulties. They were an hour late getting online, but once they got on. It was good. It was a lot of promotional, but they've got a lot of neat ideas of how they see the industry changing. And I think if you have the time, it's been turned into a video, so probably worthwhile stepping through it. It ends up linking up with the Quantum organization, and that's an interesting idea as well. So it's starting to create another community. So we're kind of, what we're starting to see in the automated buildings industry here is we're starting to connect communities. I often call it connecting the tribes. We have all of these tribes that are trying to make a nation here, and we need to connect them. We need to have communication between them, and we need to get some common ground. And yet another tribe or another area is the lighting industry. And we've got an article on our site about the LED revolution. I hadn't really thought too much about that, but lighting once consumed 40% of the average commercial energy, and it's closer to 10% because of LEDs. So that's like a big shift. The other thing, I threw up that plate there with all those gears and stuff. When we talk about systems of systems, my mind boggles as to how many systems of systems there are. And we think of in our own industry, we think of them and it's like, oh my God, there's all of these things that we have to do decarbonization, we have to do smart grid, we have to include user experience, we've got air quality, there's just, the mind just goes. But then you start seeing, oh, the lighting industry, health, all these other interlocking systems of systems. It just blows the mind. Anyway, at the bottom there is my last plea, not my last plea, another plea, to come and make sure you come out to Chicago and help us celebrate our 25th anniversary. And we're having a lot of fun actually dragging up our old history over 20 years, and we've got some good 3D flyovers and having some fun with that. You can kind of watch the industry age in front of your eyes in a minute, so it's kind of fun. Anyway, back to you, Anto.
Thank you, Ken. Incidentally, you mentioned that the sessions at AHR was going to be online. Are you talking about it actually being live online, or are you talking about it that's now up on your website?
Yeah, the agenda is up. Actually, thanks for asking that question. The agenda is up. It will be online once it's over. What we do is we actually have a computer that is sitting in the audience and watching it as the audience watches it, and we record that. If you want an example of that, if you go to the agenda that's online, if you go to the bottom, click on it's basically published by AHR Expo is the identity, and you'll actually see last year's content and how that's done. But the other thing
it's not streamed, but it's recorded.
It's recorded, but okay. But the other thing we are going to do is on that agenda, there's going to be a flyout for each session. And on the flyout will be links to speakers and moderators' resources. And this is something that we can do that AHR can't do, because we're kind of sidestep the commercialization side of it by we're providing our free sessions. So we have to keep our free sessions on the online, but we can link to some stuff. So I'm looking forward to that. We kind of got started a little bit in that last year, but we're hoping to build that out this year. So keep watching for the flyouts. Everything will work off of that, the agenda that's online now.
Okay, great.
It's worth considering streaming. I know I got engaged in a thing in Dubai, and there were about 300. It was Friday night. I didn't think there was going to be that many people there, but there was about 300 people in the audience. But they streamed it, and there were 76,000 people online. The reach, if people can, because they can also dip in and out as they want to. It's worth considering streaming things live if you can.
Actually, the one problem with streaming AHR is the AHR model is basically based on folks selling the exhibition space and having people come out and touch feel, so it's probably not, my shot from the hip is it'll be probably a long time before you'll see streaming from,
You could have the same argument though, Ken, if people wouldn't go to to football matches if it's on TV.
yes.
So guess what? They sell out.
So
Okay,
we got a
yes.
bit of that conflict there, but point taken. I was surprised there was over 300 on the passive logic as well. And you know, so a similar thing. The interesting
All right,
thing
let's
happened there-
move on to it. Let's
Yeah.
move on.
Sorry.
Okay. Okay. So for me, I was putting together my slide, and I started searching for system of systems and buildings, and lo and behold, I came up with an article that I wrote. So I thought I might as well make the slide about stuff that I wrote. But the first thing that came to mind is this thing on the left. Actually taps into, I think we were talking about this last week. I think Anna was talking about the value of data, value of a piece of information. And this is actually something that I wrote about back in 2006, nearly 20 years ago, which I at the time called it Anto's connectivity law. It basically says the value of a piece of information is proportional to the number of uses of that piece of information. Pretty simple. You can read the whole sort of justification for that in that link. And then the other one is actually this thing, which actually was tied to some sessions, some Monday Live sessions that we had around about that same time, January 2022, about 2 years ago, talking about system of systems. So we've actually touched on system of systems on Monday Live before, but as I mentioned earlier, what we want to do this month is actually talk about it not from a technology perspective, but how does it impact? How do we make it real, and what does it look like when it's real? So again, both of these are thanks to Ken on automated buildings. So thank you, Ken, for doing that. Otherwise, I have a blank slide today.
Actually, we're having a lot of fun digging through the history. There's been a lot of gems have appeared, and we'll be featuring them from now till showtime at Chicago.
Cool. Rick, do you want to speak about this? Speak to this?
Yeah, the Smarter Summit we're going to do again this year. That's going to be the Sunday before AHR starts, and again, we're just kind of giving everybody a heads up of plan for that afternoon. Same sort of 3-hour time slot. Sort of targeting over the next 10 days to get more specific details of the agenda, including some of the other organizations that we're collaborating with, some of the demonstrations of technology that we're going to be trying to get ready. So as I said, either 10 days to 2 weeks for a little more specifics, or a lot more specifics on regarding what the agenda will be, so that we can start to communicate that out through our network, your networks, and all of that. But again, a key thing that Kenny, we're just talking about, one of the key things that we're seeing in the industry is that the languages of all these different tribes, like I'm going to use your words, everybody's starting to describe the problem in more similar ways, and they're starting to talk about technology in more similar ways, and whether it's what the often delayed passive logic announcement was, or what's been happening with some of the other larger organizations, the description of the issues of the industry are becoming more and more consistent. And our key focus is going to be how the coalition and Monday Live are advocating for an open, interoperable alternative to your technology challenges. So that's my little plug.
Thank you. Thanks, Rick. The links as before, nothing's changed there. Any other thoughts or anything else newsworthy?
God, just one thing that's been fascinating me is the argument with AI about, for years we've been, obviously everybody's been pushing for open in our industry, but the challenge for AI is the big guys, Microsoft and Google, and people are saying, hey, it's got to remain closed, whereas Meta's saying, no, it's open. But the argument is, if it's open, you're kind of feeding, the darker side of things, where with using LLM allowing hackers and everybody else an easy route in to using AI to do what they want. So there's kind of this argument or kind of going on at the moment in the industry between open and closed solutions. It's kind of interesting to see where they'll end up.
Yeah. Good thought. Any other thoughts? Anything else before we move on? Hearing none, let us move on then. So to system of systems, and as I said, what is the value of systems and systems? And I put up some a slide just to sort of kick us off. What we were sort of doing last week in our planning session was actually to say, you know, can we think of a analogy that we can use to compare how system of systems is evolving in certain industries. So we talked about a whole bunch of industries, and none of us could actually pinpoint to say that's like us. What we were sort of saying is that's a little bit like us, and that's what a little bit like us. So that's how we're going to structure the conversation today. So what we're really talking about is that we're obviously focused on buildings, and we're talking about system of systems around buildings or in a building, you know, for a building, whatever words you want to use. And where here, really what's going on here is that each of these dots are these tribes that Ken and others were talking about, right? So HVAC, lighting, energy, sub-metering, whatever, IoT, et cetera, right? And I think the whole thesis of this is that these are a system of systems. But there's a sort of the question mark that's sort of often asked with that statement is, what is it and what makes it a system of systems? Why is it different than any old system? And why is it any better? Right. So those are kind of the questions. And that obviously is not a question just about the technology, but how do you implement it and design it and use it? So that's what we want to talk about. And we'll probably compare it to how smartphones work, because that industry has also got a whole bunch of tribes, you know, the tribes that make the glass, the tribes that make the CPU, the battery, et cetera, the telcos, et cetera, right? So the picture is somewhat similar to buildings. And the other one that we've talked about is cars. Obviously, that is not only just with electric cars, but before that, there were internal combustion cars, but they all had system of systems of some sort. Right. So how does that work? And then Glenn at Haro recently has been talking about the system of systems of the airline industry. So again, similar, different technologies bringing things together and different stakeholders and different part of the ecosystem. Another one that's often comes up is smart agriculture with Farmer Joe there. So that's kind of, I just wanted to stick that up. And the other thing that's kind of interesting is that in a way, these actually create another system of systems, right? Because in many ways, these are connected, right? So there's a sort of a fractal nature of this, and you can actually argue that you can zoom in to the HVAC dot, and you'll see different systems in that as well. So that's sort of one of the natures of system of systems is fractal in nature, so it grows upon each other. So I thought I'd bring that up first, and then open it up for conversation and comments. Anybody want to kick this off?
I'll have a shot.
Go ahead.
I think that you know, one of the challenges we have with the systems we talked about is the systems of systems concept. It actually looks more complex than what it actually does. And in fact, you know, the way that I kind of describe it is the system of systems is how you actually, well, let me go back a step. If you're in the software development business, right, and building software products, especially enterprise software, you know, in the cloud, today you do that with microservices, and you break down the applications down to, you know, microservices and communications buses, and as opposed to building monolithic applications like we used to back ages and ages ago. In a lot of contexts, when you talk about systems of systems, it's the same sort of concept. How do you break it down into smaller, manageable pieces that have areas of subject matter experts and capabilities? And then how do those systems talk to each other, right? Which is an important aspect. Because again, in the software development business, you use messaging buses like Kafka and Confluent and some of these other technologies. So yeah, so it's it tends to look a lot more complex than actually what it is that you're solving. And by being able to break down the complex systems into these smaller components that interact and can communicate with each other, allows you to really build something really complex with a whole bunch of people who aren't having to know everything about the whole thing from the guy, right? So back to your examples, the guy who's dealing with the flight booking systems and how to get tickets to you doesn't really need to know how the pilot flies the plane per se, right? And how the planes operate. And so you can break down the components to a much smaller subject matter expertise. And I think that's really the core of what we talk about when we talk about systems of systems, right? How to break it down into. But the key about it, which you kind of had on that chart, is how do those components talk to each other? In the software development world, that's really well done and defined and secure, and because that's how you build software these days when you use message busing technologies. But when you kind of come into our space, you need to have those standards in place.
I think also, Annalise, is that I guess first thoughts are, again, just like Anto's slide was, the more people can gain access to the data and sharing it and using it. But a whole lot of our stuff is also interoperability between those systems, as well as sharing the data, the lighting, the security, the HVAC. They are, there is that interoperability, so that when a person walks into a building, the lights are on, the temperature is right, and you can get access, and the lifts are there and stuff. So it's probably a bit more of that than there are in some of the other things that were shown there.
So Roger, you brought up a word that I've been contemplating here since we started having our internal discussions about SOS, or systems of system. Is systems of system no more than interoperability? And we've been talking about interoperability now as an industry for years and years. Again, whether or not we have reached complete interoperability, that's a whole debate or a whole another thing for discussion on another day, or whatever the case is. But as I look at systems of systems, that's all it is. It's interoperability. And are we, to your point, Anno, about complexity, I think when you talk about systems of systems, it's immediate thought of and perceived as being complex.
Yeah.
So as an example, and again, I've been trying to, we've talked about the phone, you said aircraft, whatever. So I try to dumb it down to something that I might understand other than buildings. All right. Obviously I knew that. So my analogy is this: take Xbox. Xbox is a system. You've got individual parts that make up the Xbox system. You got the console, you got wireless controllers, you got a display screen, you've got the remote, and how that remote needs to work with the box and the display. You have the game or the application. You've got cybersecurity, if you want to go ahead and throw that into this whole thing. You've got the handheld devices that, whatever the case is, other devices that they have available for the system. So is that a good example of system of systems?
Yeah, I mean, from my perspective, it is, right? Again, what you've done is you've broken it down into the subcomponents where there's areas of expertise that, I can get a engineer working on those different components, and then how do you communicate between them all, right? At the end of the day.
Yeah, but I was going to say, but to me, that's one thing. Obviously, the development, the engineering, what you just said. But then ultimately it's the outcome.
Right.
Is what is the outcome? Oh man, I had a hell of an experience playing some game on Xbox or whatever the case is, and it blew my socks off. And that's the ultimate goal of an Xbox, to create that system. Sorry, that experience. I'm sorry. So
I agree with you. I think where I was coming from, though, Mark, was that you could build that experience and that solution the old way, like as one great big monolithic application that one guy built, right? But what we're recognizing is that this approach of system of systems, in my mind, allows a lot larger team of people putting it all together. And I think that extends that to, back to our stack, our smarter stack. One of the things that we were challenged with the smarter stack was using it to help identify where people have specific areas of expertise, or where certain products fit and where other products don't. And I think this sort of talks to that same thing. I mean, you can almost go back to the stack model too, and you can break down systems of systems. There's also a play in the smarter stack as well, right? There are folks who do well with, to your point, Mark, folks who do well with the user experience, the entry, the sensor experience, the integration experience, how do you bring all that together? So I come at it more for what does systems of systems do differently to give you a much better experience, to your point, right? Why would I, to have that enhanced experience, why would I use a systems of systems approach as opposed to building some great big monolithic, Xbox application? And from
I'd like to add another function, though, that I think is part of systems to systems. I kind of view it as a concentrator. It takes a whole bunch of complex things and turns it into a system. And back to some of Mark's words about that everything is sort of outcome. We need to start thinking more in an outcome. What is it we're trying to achieve from these systems? So basically, I see it as it takes a whole bunch of complexity and it concentrates it into, as simple in my mind, as an icon on a screen that I can click on and I can get a result, I can get an outcome. And I think the people that are building the system of systems can go and do that. And so they can take our very complex world and make it into a bunch of simple icons. And certainly the mobile phone industry has done that.
But also the other aspect is that you mentioned experience, Mark, which is great, and you were focused on the end user's experience, the person playing the game. But I would argue that there are lots of other experiences. The experience of the person or the company that's making the component, the game itself, coding the game, right? Mm-hmm. The experience for them is also important, right? Because they need some outcomes of people using their games. It's a completely different set of outcomes. And so are the vendors of displays, screens, for example, right? They need outcomes, right? That outcome is enabled by having the Xbox being there. So there are lots of different experiences, not just the end user.
Absolutely. I totally agree. Because again, ultimately, does it come down to systems of systems? Beside outcome, we're all business people. It's to sell shit.
Right.
Speaking of selling stuff, Xbox sales are way down.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And my son hasn't used his Xbox. The 12-year-old hasn't used his Xbox in over a year and a half. Everything instead. He's got a gaming laptop. So when we just took a little trip over the weekend, he didn't want to take his Xbox. He took his phone and his gaming laptop. So, it's
another party in the system of systems are gaming computer manufacturers.
Right. And Xbox, honestly, Microsoft is saddled now with a 10 or 15-year-old operating system that they keep having to keep dragging along. To Anno's point, if Microsoft could do it over again, would they do it the way they did it? I don't think so. And I'm not here to criticize Microsoft. I think an open Xbox where developers could actually contribute and develop to but they can't. you have to create a hack like what Fortnite has done to be able to have people be able to use their Xbox with your innovative software. So they're stuck with an ancient technology that is not upgradable. It's not modular, and no way in hell they would do it the same way they did it when they started 10 years ago.
Sounds like
Interestingly
our-
enough,
Rick, you just said ancient equals 10 years. Did you catch yourself?
No, but that's true in the technology world.
Yeah,
And like
so what was the
Yeah.
story we had earlier this year about the guy who went into the building to figure out what was wrong, and there was a PDP-11 computer that the power supply had failed? Now could be argued to be ancient technology.
Yeah, it is sad that a lot of our system integrators have to go to eBay to find replacement parts.
That's right.
You know, there's an attribute here that's kind of coming into clarity for me about system of systems, and it has to do with a range of tightly coupled system versus loosely coupled
Yeah.
system of systems.
Yeah,
right?
that's a good point.
And
If-
Microsoft and Xbox, I would qualify more on the tightly coupled.
Right.
Right. But we have some in a Tesla car or electric car in general, and that whole experience, again, fairly tightly coupled. But you as soon as you get away from that core component, whatever that is, whether it be the Xbox console or the car or whatever, the further you go out, the more loosely coupled all of this stuff is. So it is all about, coming back to what Mark said, to me, it's always been about interoperability. And I've heard nothing new that changes my perception of that, right? Making things interoperable, having data, standard data sets and autonomies and so forth. Ontology, yeah, you know what I'm talking about. That all is the underpinnings of this, right?
And if you take Xbox, it presumably Xbox does HDMI, right? So it is interoperable with one screen and everybody else's screen, right? But so there are points of interoperability, but the whole Xbox itself was not built for composable and interoperability because that's their strategy 10,
Right.
15 years ago, right?
And
Whereas
that's indicative of our industry, of our
Yeah.
world. Yeah.
Exactly.
Right. These systems were not built for that.
Yeah, well,
And it's-
one of the exercises that we did when I was discussing this in the Digital Twin Consortium is trying to contrast system of systems from systems. You know, what's the difference between a system and a system of systems, right? And one of the examples that we kept on coming up with is that an airplane is a system because it is specified. Right, you can tell ahead of time before somebody builds a Boeing 737 how it's going to come out. Right, this is very specific. All of the details is very specific. All 737s look the same and they fly the same because it's specified that way. But the airline system is not specified. There is no specification that says in the US there's going to be an airline system with 17 airports and blah blah blah. It evolves all the time. Right, so an airplane is a system that doesn't evolve in its own right, but an airline system is a system because it's tightly coupled. And if somebody wants to build an airport somewhere in the middle of nowhere, they can. And it can fit easily into the system of systems of the airlines. So I found that really very useful a couple of years ago. I don't know if that's.
Well, the SOS term, does you can argue it gets confusing and we sort of lose our way in describing it. But it occurred to me that the system we're talking about ultimately is a smart building. The definition of a smart building is that it's capable of having all these different systems interoperate as one cohesive system or smart building. So if that's why we are having the Smarter Summit. That's everything is a smarter stack. It's all to get to that day where we can build a smart building confidently and inexpensively because everything interoperates by design.
Well, that you're going down a slippery slope there, because your definition was pretty good, but I would say that you would need to say something along the lines that it should work with any system, past, present, or future, whether it's known or not.
Mhm.
Right? That changes the dynamics totally, because therefore you cannot design for something that doesn't exist. The only thing you can design is the interoperation of anything that doesn't exist.
Right.
What about the skill set? Because that varies as well, because suddenly someone's got to actually know,
Well,
or if, that's the difference between the data and the interoperability. It's quite easy to go and grab some data. To actually, get these systems to be interoperable, you've got to actually understand each of the systems to make it work. And who does that? Is it,
Well,
the SI does one system. Is it the MSI again who does all this? Who's the guy who's going to pull it, the SOS together, right? So that it becomes, a useful, smart,
So
smart
if
building.
So if Rick's son bought a Samsung display and plugs it into his Xbox and it works, how much skill does he have in terms of the Xbox, the cabling, what's actually happening in that cabling, right? So my answer to you is it depends on the technology, and if the technology can be made into a plug and play, then that kind of behavior can be extracted out of it. But if it's not, then you actually have to do all of the hard work to actually solder all the wires and stuff.
Well, that depends upon the standards used in our case, in each industry. The security guys use the same one as the guy who's putting in the space management, or the IAQ, or the HVAC, or the lighting system. Probably not at this time.
So
that's where the integration bit comes in.
So let me ask you guys this. All right. So I said SOS is interoperability. All right. Whatever. Is SOS, and I'm going to use this term, I hate it. Is SOS no more than SPOG, a single pane of glass?
No.
Not at all. Because
Why?
Because to me, my answer is a single pane of glass is a statement made from a perspective of a human, of how the human wants to see his system, his whatever it is.
But isn't that an outcome?
I think
Well,
it's
a single pane of glass can be created best using a system of systems. You can say it that
Right.
way, but they're not equivalent. They're not the same thing.
It doesn't exclude the single pane of glass, Mark,
Right.
but it doesn't require it.
Well, then
So-
is one of the outcomes of SOS a single pane of glass?
Yeah.
No,
It
the
should
outcome would
enable
be to
it.
be able to enable it, to be able to do
Should
it.
enable it.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So if I'm a security director, my interest in the HVAC and lights, maybe lights is somewhat significant from a security perspective, but the HVAC is probably much less of interest. So what I need to see in my world is going to be different, and that's perfectly fine.
I would say it's a subset of the overall set of Venn diagrams that make up system of systems, right? There are overlapping parts to this that are made possible because of the philosophy of interoperability within system of systems.
Yeah.
Single pane of glass being one of them.
Rick, you're
I think you
muted.
can't
You're
take it a
talking and
completely
muted.
different direction. Is if I can go back to my tribe analogy, and we've got all of these tribes that are doing various things. Maybe one tribe is utility, one tribe is user experience. If we take that and we kind of look at how apps work and how the actual apps educate the person. So I'm thinking the systems of systems are needed to generate their outcomes, and they may have several outcomes from their system of system. They basically lay those out in some kind of manner, and these smoke signals come from the tribes, and we gather them up and we read them, and that's answers Roger's question, is how do we understand? Because somehow we ferret with our phones and we pick through this myriad of stuff, and we read what the app does, and we say, that's the outcome I want, and we attach it to our phone. I think in simple terms, I think that's what we're trying to achieve with buildings.
I think of them as sort of use cases, right? Of why two things have a reason to interact with each other. So yeah, I mean, it's all down to what the entities need to do with other entities in the system of systems.
But I think the education of the system of systems has to be generated by the system of systems.
Yes.
Maybe the point I'm trying to make.
Yeah, the systems have to somehow know how to do its own thing and be able to interact with others that can help it do its own thing.
And if that's done in a good, a knowledgeable manner, AI should be able to help us and answer Roger's question is how do I, as a mere mortal, pull this together? And the answer is you don't. You use AI.
Yeah, AI can definitely help, and also AI are also the things that could be, as it were, the nodes of a system of systems, right? That there's sort of almost a sort of assumption right now that AI is really like ChatGPT. In other words, there's this big thing in the sky that's going to do all of these things. But in reality, a lot of AI is going to be in devices or in different levels up and down the architecture. You know, it's going to happen wherever it needs to happen.
Yeah.
So they then become not just the tool that can actually make everything work, but they are the thing that actually providing some value that can be used by other entities.
The glue that binds.
Was it's both the glue that binds and what is being bound by the glues. Bad grammar,
But the system of system organization is a organization we need to proliferate and standardize so that the tribes can talk and that there are general rules as there are in societies and countries, and if we kind of use that same analogy.
Yep.
Great. So
Sorry,
go ahead.
Go ahead, Steve.
So in terms of examples, the one that I've shared with you guys privately, but I'll now go more public with it, is the business I'm responsible for right now is needed an ERP solution and wanted to do it at a affordable price point. And so, you know, there are some major companies out there who have ERP class products that, you know, if you're a mid-size or larger company, you can afford to use those products, right? In our situation, we were hoping to come up with something that was much less expensive, right? Yet still gave ERP type functionality. And what I've discovered or experienced, that is a better word here, is that in this day and age in the IT world, interoperability is almost a given in terms of how these packages are able to be sold and marketed. Meaning we have put together an ERP system with things that are starting with, you know, Office 365, okay, as our business platform. For our CRM, we went with a company called Monday.com. For our inventory management, we went with a package called Zoho Inventory. For our documents for doing documentation that like contract signing and things like that, we went with PandaDocs. And in all cases, these packages have been relatively easy to get them to work with one another. So when I put a lead into my CRM, I'm immediately able to send emails using my Microsoft email client. I didn't have to do anything special, right? And you know, and then my accounting is QuickBooks Online, and QuickBooks and Zoho know how to take the inventory sales orders I generate in Zoho, and it shows up in QuickBooks for my sales and revenue and billing and all of that. Okay, so And Zoho itself, when I get ready to ship something, it has support for all the major carriers. So I can just link right into UPS's package and to get all the, the cost of the shipping and the tracking information, all that just automatically just syncs right in. So it's been, and back in the day, I went through an SAP conversion, and I've seen how these monolithic packages work and how much time and energy and resources it takes to make a conversion like that. It's mind-boggling. And, we're deploying what I just described with fractional resources in almost no time at all. And so what I think we're all saying, and is this ability to interoperate with minimal skill, with minimal resources, is the objective here. And I'm just pointing out that the IT industry, at least from an ERP perspective, already delivers it. And bottom line is, we're doing it for a fraction of the cost. The software licensing for what I just described is less than $400 a month for everything. Okay. Now you just try to compare that to, I'm not going to name the names, the major packages are out there. It's incredible how powerful yet inexpensive these packages are, yet they were designed to interoperate each and every one with one another. And these companies almost go out of their way to advertise their ability to interoperate with their competitors.
And you could choose the best. You can use the best in class.
Exactly.
Rather than one
Thank you,
monolithic
Roger.
package.
You can use best in class in each of the individual modules, and you can swap them out if you don't like the one, because a new guy comes along, he's got better features. You just swap it out, and boom, you're right back up and running again.
So Steve, so I think I couldn't agree more. Great example. And that's the way it should be.
Mhm.
The difference is they want to do it. All of those folks have
Right.
agreed to do it. We, as an industry, have never agreed to do it. And that is, in my mind, that is your big brick wall that needs to come down. Will it ever? I don't think I don't think it will.
I would challenge that they agreed to do it. They have not.
Right.
It's just happened by it's happened by force.
Well, they support
market-
it. They're supporting it. So at the end
Some
of
of
the
them
day, they support
reluctantly.
it. So
Some of them reluctantly.
Because that's their business model, is that they do that.
Right.
They're younger, smarter companies than the big old institutionals, and they want to be able to do that sort of thing.
Yeah, Zoho, there would have been some conversation in Zoho that actually makes the whole suite. So Steve could have gone with Zoho, the whole stack.
Yep.
Yeah, right.
He
But I
decided
didn't.
not to, but he
Yeah, right.
decided not to. He just wanted to use their inventory piece and use
He's
other
going to
pieces.
He's going to get emails from them every week, though, to try and convince him to switch.
Of course. One of the things that we haven't really mentioned about this is a lot of these standards have become de facto standards, the way that things are interoperating, right? It wasn't that an industry got together and agreed, this is how we're going to do it. Somebody developed it, it worked, and people started adopting it and using it because it was openly available and defined, right? That's the piece that has been missing in our industry. And then the support to do that. And instead, I can name several instances where there have been lawsuits when people have tried to do that, to prevent exactly what we're talking about, right? And that's a big impediment to this whole thing in our industry.
I think if we look back at the history of our industry, just take as an example that we all understand, like BACnet. In the early days, the majors fought BACnet because it was open, they didn't want it. The upstarts all supported BACnet, and eventually they did two things. They took the market away from a lot of the majors, and the second thing they did is they forced those majors to adopt BACnet. And I think this is exactly what's happening with the system of systems, is these new players, they want into our market. And the way for them to get into the market is to basically show you where, show you new ways of, new workarounds of getting around all of this. And they're going to change the market, because as some people start supporting them, then some of the majors are going to lose by holding on to their market. And BACnet is almost in that same situation now. That is, the BACnet guys are the guys that are about to be uprooted, would be my guess. And yeah, anyway, so that change will come, trust me.
Well, maybe came from with, maybe you could see something like Niagara as a stepping stone, where, the battle was with the bigger companies trying to get their protocols and things. Whereas, they've got hundreds of protocols now that can actually, they integrate, and it's not the solution, but it could be seen as a stepping stone to help break down this concern about people being able to actually get things to communicate. I mean, it's not the solution we're talking about, but maybe they've helped break down some of those challenges that were where people kind of siloed everything to protect their maintenance base.
Jim, you've been very.
I've been struggling as to when to interject, but I'm still on Mark's point. What is the value proposition of systems to people? And as I think here, and I've listened to all of the other examples that people have given of systems, the problem that comes to me in our industry is the who. Who are we doing this for? And that would help us get to the what. The who is complicated in many ways. And Anno Schulten brought this up on the Wednesday call, which is that actually the who, in the case of his business, is his business. He's in the property management business, and a lot of this value can accrue to someone that's in the property management business. We've tossed around the owners, the occupants of these buildings, but there might be a matrix we could come up with of where system of systems apply and to whom in the industry. But I'd really need to find out who the buyer is and what they care about individually. We've talked about bits and bytes and interoperability for 30 years. It's all important, but what are the value propositions that people really care about? And that starts with, who are we talking about before we can decide what they care about?
Isn't it about making the industry, or maybe one of the value propositions is making the industry be more efficient and effective? In which case the audiences there are actually the industry, the vendors and the channel and the people who write specs, etc., etc. Because what we really want as an industry is an efficient industry that can deliver whatever value our customers want efficiently. Isn't that one answer?
I think that's another column in the matrix, Anto.
Okay.
I don't think it's the whole story.
No.
But I mean, if I identified, you've got owners, you've got property managers, you have tenants or occupants of the building, depending on the economic situation. And then you have the industry. And if you wanted to, break that down into finer categories for architects, engineers, system integrators, contractors, I think you could do that. But, if we look at disrupting the industry and what's wrong with it, there are a lot of things that are wrong with it, or things that we could streamline and fix. The question is what do people care enough about to go through it? So when Mark was going through his Xbox example, there is a very focused endpoint for the value proposition delivered by the Xbox. The cell phone, same analogy. The automobile, these are all largely consumer value propositions. And when we get into these complex industrial spheres, I'm not sure that the value propositions and the marketing holds the same water, because the complexity of who the customer is.
Yeah, and I wanted to get back to that too, Jim, and I'm with Jim on this too. I mean, the systems from my perspective, and again, this is my personal perspective, of course, is that it's a good approach to solve complex things that I need to do. right? And from my space. And if I decide to choose that approach, then it makes sense to me. And, you know, we've done the research and it makes sense. And it does make sense from that perspective. To your point, Anto, at the end of the day, or Mark's point, actually, more importantly, what I end up delivering is a much better experience. Don't know that Mark or my tenants or my building owners really need to know what the pieces were behind the scenes that got it there. You know what I mean? The fact that I used that approach or used that solutions, I ended up delivering something that was a much better experience, hopefully at a lesser cost or lower cost because I was more efficient at it, to your point, Anto. But again, it's the key point that Jim brings up. It's the who, right? Who does that matter to? In his points valid. In my world, it matters to me because I'm trying to bring those experiences and solutions to my clients. And if things like systems assistance make that effective, which they do, but you know, the approach is a much more efficient way and quicker way of delivering solutions because I'm basically using subject matter experts in their own spaces as opposed to teeing up with one big blob, you know, that I can't, one big Xbox that I can't mess with.
So to Jim's point, if you think about, when I think about our industry, we've been focused for 30 years basically on facility engineering, right? As our primary buyer in various ways, you know, and where the owner's concerned or the asset manager is concerned, it's not clear to me that we've ever given that audience a value proposition for why they want their building to be smart. Right. So the facilities engineers, yeah, they're trying to do their job every day with less. They want fewer headaches. All makes sense, right? But at the level of the owner who owns an asset, who has tenants they're trying to keep happy, the asset manager who wants to, again, from a if they're a REIT and they're trying to market their property or they're out looking for new properties and they're trying to decide whether that new property is worth having or not. What have we done to give that audience meaningful data that tells them, you know, their EUI for the facility, tells them the asset history that's there, tells them the relative cost of maintenance for that, for all the different systems, so that they can put some kind of a judgment together as to what the total picture is going to look like on buying and selling the asset. I'm not aware that we've done much at all in those areas, maybe to a certain extent on the energy side with the analytics packages, but resolving that all through the possibility of, you know, BIM creating a good asset description of what I've got, and then the real-time data providing you know, information that's needed for the analytics and so on. But to me, I feel like if we're going to really make a difference and go beyond the 20 or 25% of the market that's buying building automation, we got to get a value proposition in front of the other 75, 80% of the marketplace out there as to why they should have a smart building.
Steve, I agree with you. And I think that you've all heard me say how the conversation is changing. And it's, in my opinion, it is changing, albeit slow as hell. But that conversation is changing to those points and to whom you have directed that to the owners, the operators, from the business side of this whole thing.
Right.
And, you know, is it, you know, healthy environments? Okay, fine. You know, operational efficiency. We've all heard that for a long time. But to your point, as an example, it's the value of that asset. Okay. How does the stuff we all do each and every day contribute to the value of that asset? As an example, I'm not saying that's the only one. Okay.
Okay. So we have to bring this to a wrap because it's 2 minutes past, and we said we're going to do a rapid fire question, and I was going to ask the question: can SOS thinking add value to the BAS industry? Yes, no, or I plead the fifth. Start with you, Ken. I'm going to go around my screen.
Yes,
Anno,
Oh, for sure.
Mark,
Yes.
Tracy,
Yes.
Roger.
I'm not sure because I think it's already happened.
Okay,
There's already interoperability where it's needed.
so you broke the rule, but I think that's
Yeah, no.
I took
There you
the
go,
fifth.
no.
Shame on you,
Steve,
Roger.
Yes,
Steve,
absolutely.
Jim.
Yes.
Yeah, I would say yes as well. So that's pretty unanimous, other than Roger's caveat.
That's all right.
So with
That's
that-
right.
So with that, let's bring this to a close. Thank you very much. Thanks everyone for joining us. We'll get the video up and we'll see you next week.
See you
All
all.
right.
Bye all.
Sounds good.
There you go.
Cheers.
See
bye
ya.
guys.
See ya.